The Disfigured. This is an old horror story from Japan, and its main character is a woman called Kukase Kana, which means woman with a slit in her mouth. According to legend, she haunted the streets at night, wearing a surgical mask and a huge pair of scissors. On a calm night, a man walking alone on the street saw a strange figure approaching him. Kukase Kana approached him and asked him if he thought she was beautiful, and when he said yes, she took off her mask and showed her completely disfigured mouth. The man was horrified and tried to run, but Kukase Kana caught up to him and cut him with her scissors. More townspeople also reported seeing Kukase Kana afterwards, and many were attacked and maimed by her. City authorities tried to capture her, but she disappeared without a trace. To this day, the legend of Kukase Kana haunts people in Japan, and many are still afraid to go out at night, especially alone. The story serves as a warning not to trust strangers and to always be alert to danger. Elisa Lam's horror story. Young Elisa Lam took a one-way trip to visit the United States in 2013. She was the daughter of Chinese immigrants and lived in Canada with her family. Elisa had just finished college and was preparing to move in with her boyfriend. She was a very sweet, gentle, friendly, and sociable girl. Before starting a new stage in her life, she wanted to travel, and that's how he arrived in Los Angeles, USA, where he stayed at the old and cheap Hotel Cecil. Like any young tourist who wants to save money, she used to take public transport. Hotel staff described her as a very friendly girl. A few days later, she stopped sending news to her family. She had disappeared. Her things were in her room, but they didn't find any trace of the girl. Her parents moved to the United States to investigate their daughter's disappearance. They held numerous press conferences without success. Police requested video from the hotel's security cameras, and what they saw was as frightening as it was incomprehensible. In the images, it was possible to see strange behavior in the girl. She ran away from something invisible through the corridors, entered the elevators to try to hide. She even leaned over to make sure she wasn't being chased, but it wasn't possible to see anyone else in the images. What happened to Elisa? The police concluded that Elisa was under the influence of some drug or alcohol. They also raised the possibility that he had had a bout of schizophrenia. His parents, however, did not agree with either hypothesis. Time passed and the investigation continued. Meanwhile, at the Cecil Hotel, customers began to complain that when they took a shower, the water came out black and smelled very bad. The same happened in the kitchen. An employee went up to the roof to check the 4 water tanks. When he opened the tank, he saw that the water was green and black. An unbearable stench was coming from there. Elisa's body was inside. Guests had drunk and used this water. When firefighters arrived to remove Elisa's body, none of them were able to get through the small entrance door to the tank, and they wondered how a body had gotten through that tiny hole. It was necessary to cut the tank to get the girl's body out. The forensic examination did not find any trace of torture, causing the police to determine that it had been suicide. The Cecil Hotel was built in 1917, and since then has been the scene of several terrible events. Many guests claim to have felt the presence of evil entities in the place. The House of Death. This story was in New York, USA. It was built in 1874 and later divided into apartments. They say that 22 spirits live there. Among them, the writer Mark Twain, who lived there for a year. Those who tell this story say that it is possible to see him accompanied by his cat. Tenants have already narrated different experiences they had in the building, like Jan Bryant Bartel, a girl who moved there with her partner in 1957. From the first day, Jan felt a strange presence in the house, feeling strange and watched. One night, when she went to the kitchen to get a glass of water, she heard footsteps behind her, but when she turned around, she didn't see anyone. When he returned, he felt someone brushing his neck. This was the first of episodes that happened to her several times, so she started writing a diary of all the experiences she had there. Days later, a horrible smell began to emanate from the floor. One day, Jan was taking care of the house when he saw a strange human figure, a dark shadow with the silhouette of a very tall and strong man. She went to the other room, and when she saw it, she screamed loudly. The shadow was there. She chased Jan wherever she went. Then, she reached out to touch it and felt cold on her fingertips, describing it as a substance without substance. After a few years, the couple decided to move away, but Jan wrote that that shadow haunted her for the rest of her days. End of this horror story. Jan died under strange circumstances, perhaps even committed suicide. His book Spindrift, Spray from a Psychic Sea, was published by his friends, in which he narrates the horrors experienced in that house. A few years later, in 1987, a little girl died in the same building due to a blow given by her father. Currently, the building is empty, but its neighbors assure that an evil presence lives there, the seventh barn. In Ohio, in the United States, there was a very rich farmer with a lot of land who had the habit of, for every birth of a child, build a barn in honor. And so he did consecutively with his 6 children. Some time passed, and his wife became pregnant again. Thus, the farmer set out to build the 7th barn for the child who was about to arrive. However, unfortunately, during the birth, both mother and child died, which left the farmer desolate and mad with pain and suffering. Over time, the man was no longer able to take care of his farms and his businesses, and this caused that his family contracted a lot of debt to the point of bankruptcy. According to what they say, because of all the despair that plagued the man, he took an axe and killed each of his 6 children, burying them in each barn respectively. Finally, the farmer went to the 7th barn and hanged himself. As this was the only barn left standing, many people report seeing the ghost of the farmer hanging and swaying, as if the suicide had happened recently, the Mass of the Dead. This is a horror story from Auro Preto, Minas Gerais, the caretaker and sacristan of a church that was located on the outskirts of a cemetery witnessed very terrifying scenes. The man was already lying down to sleep when he began to hear strange sounds coming from the church. Soon, he decided to get up to see what was happening. Upon arriving at the temple, the caretaker saw an unusual light and heard several voices praying and singing religious songs. The man, who was already extremely scared, observed the faithful present at that ceremony with greater attention. Then, he realized that they were not people, but skeletons.